Islam will continue to be triumphant until there have been 12 Khulafa, all of them from Al-Quraysh.
The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever.
This is my brother, my executor, and my successor among you, so listen to him and obey.
My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting.
Whoso obeys me obeys God. Whoever disobeys me disobeys God. Whoever disobeys my commander disobeys me.
The Lord said to me, You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession.
Two systems of government, two visions for life on earth. Whichever is true changes everything. This is Christ and Khulafa.
All right, guys. Ramy season 3. A bunch of people watched our review of Ramy season 1. 3 people watched our review of Ramy season 2. So the one of you still watching, maybe it's Ramy himself. We're continuing our quest through the Ramyverse. The Ramy cinematic universe.
I want you to put in the background the Ramy universe.
Oh yeah. We have a new graphic.
The graphic.
Yes.
Yeah. So the Ramyverse, the Ramyverse right now includes Ramy, obviously, Mo.
Yes.
It includes Miss Marvel.
Yes, which we didn't review, by the way.
Not yet.
Not yet.
We will.
Yeah.
And the reason that fits into the Ramyverse is because the Uncle Nassim actor is also the actor who plays the Imam in Miss Marvel.
Nice. Oh my god.
So I've got a connected universe thing going in my mind where he's living like a triple life.
Yeah.
You know, like what he's in one of his lives he's a gay man. In the other life he's kind of a cranky Arab uncle. In his third life he's kind of a Zen Imam.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You know, and when they took the Infinity Stones and moved everything and all the universes, Loki and blah blah blah.
and then there's Moon Knight, which has
Yes.
yeah, which has
Dina.
Dina in it. May, forgot the last name.
Kalamwe.
May Kalamwe. But we won't review Moon Knight for this because it doesn't have any Islam themes.
Right. Right.
It's, you know, you can occasionally hear some people like shout things in Arabic, but that's not enough for it to get a review on our podcast. We all enjoyed it though, right?
Oh yeah, Moon Knight was great. Yeah. What?
I haven't seen it.
Oh man, come on.
I know.
So we just finished. We just watched the season 3 finale. So let's talk about those. Let's start with talking about those last 2 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
There, because they're some of the craziest things in the show so far, I think.
Yes. I mean, can we just have a moment of silence for Boomer?
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, that was sad. That was really sad. How Boomer, and you know, we were all, I forget what we were doing. I think we were talking, and you spoiled it for me.
Spoiled it.
So I was watching it with my wife, and I'm like, oh, this is how Boomer dies. And you know,
So sorry.
yeah, I told my wife afterward, like, yeah, Sophia spoiled it for me, but
It still didn't take away the pain.
no, you know, you can't leave drugs around dogs. They'll eat them. You can't leave chocolate around dogs.
There's a dog at Armistice that looks like Boomer, and I'm like,
Oh. Our coffee shop.
Yes, Armistice is the coffee shop that we meet at.
Well, I mean, it was a great season finale. I mean, cinematically speaking, it was just beautiful. It was just amazing. I mean, just they did so well
I think it's interesting
shooting it.
that everyone is just having this crisis. and all of the crises are all just kind of coming to a head, right?
Yeah.
So Dina's crisis, you know, who she really is, and you know what her expectations are, and her, you know, their parents like tripping on mushrooms.
Yep.
Was like it was so unexpected. That is not how I expected the season to end, right?
Yeah.
You know, like eyes all bugged out. I thought, you know, the actor who plays Farouk was like, his facial expressions were. I mean, I can't
eyes.
I can't say whether or not I've actually had mushrooms before, but wink, wink. They were pretty on the spot. You know, it makes me think that maybe he has some experience.
Yeah.
There. But you know, his reactions were like priceless. And every time I looked at him, I'm like, he really looks like he's bugging out.
Mm-hmm.
He's such a great actor because he's not actually in like older bald guy.
Right.
Right. That's a look he puts on. He's
right.
You know,
right.
I don't think he's old enough in real life to be Ramy's father.
No.
Right.
But he just pulls it off so well.
He does, and you know, I think it's interesting that their crisis of faith is like nobody knows who they are. They really are watching this kind of progression happen where Ramy doesn't know who he is anymore. He's never really known, right? And the parents don't know really who they are because, you know, in the last episode is titled "They Gave It Up." We gave it up for hot dogs.
Give it all up for hot dogs.
We gave it all up for hot dogs. You know, they don't know who they are anymore after living in America for 30 years. And everyone's kind of having these, like, crises, and they're all coming to a head at this,
Yes.
you know, in this last episode. And I just thought it was, like, so much, like, imagery. You were talking about the cinematography. I feel like there's things that, like, in the last episode, Ramy's beard is growing back. Right? Did you catch that?
Yeah.
Yeah, he had shaved, you know, and
beard's growing
I remember the Palestinian girl when he went in one of the previous episodes. He you know went over the wall in Bethlehem to meet a girl.
Yeah.
And she was like, "You looked cuter with your beard." So slowly, you know, these things are coming back. He's like actually like coming, you know,
Coming
full
out
circle.
of his, yeah.
Right? It's coming full circle.
My favorite part was the parents talking about how long they'd lived, just like together, because they had seemed so disconnected for a lot of these episodes that you really are like, what the heck? Why are these people married? Like, what even is their relationship? And then in this episode, you can really see them coming together, like really reflecting. And I think that a lot of people take 30 plus years to like it's I don't know, it can take adults a long time to reflect on their lives and to really have those moments. Like, I'm super relatable to my parents. Honestly, Maisa and Farouk have made more progress than like my own parents, but like they
It's a TV show.
Totally, but like I think it's very genuine to real life of people having their midlife crisis, and then like it taking a lot for people to finally take a second, or shrooms, for people to like finally take a second to question everything and really reflect.
Like the from what I can tell, the moral of this episode is the solution to your problems are drugs and Islam.
Yeah. Well,
Taken together.
right.
Yeah.
that's the only way we've seen either of them work in the show.
I think it's really interesting that you bring that up, because I was looking at it going, okay, one person is connecting with Islam through failure, right? That's Dina. And Ramy is connecting with Islam through also failure, but like the threat of death, right?
Yeah.
Like he has gotten in bed with some bad people, and they're gonna want their money, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like you were saying, you know, when we were rewatching, what did you say about Ayala?
I'm just terrified.
Right.
She terrifies me.
Right.
And she's gonna get him.
She's scary.
Yeah.
And you know, her parents.
My last name's Ayala.
I know.
I just have to say
Wink,
that.
wink. And the other one is, you know, the parents are connecting with Islam through magic mushrooms, right?
Yeah.
Like, first of all, there's one thing that I thought was very unrealistic about that. If you eat magic mushrooms, the first thing you do is throw up once they start. So it was all very clean. It was very sanitary, you know.
And by Sunni rules, I think mushrooms would actually invalidate your prayers, as would a dog walking in front of your prayers.
Yeah.
Which, yeah.
Or yeah, right. Like you're praying to God and seeing a dog. Right. In Islam, it seems like there's a disconnect there. But you know, it kind of fits this whole thing of like spiritual but not religious. Like you kind of see that like in our culture, you know, in American Western culture, it's everywhere. It's not just in Western culture, but
yeah. So I'm actually like really, really curious where season 4 picks up, because there's a certain extent of yeah, these people are surrendering themselves to a higher power, and that's good. Watching this, but there's also the certain sense of like, wait, what is everyone doing?
yeah,
It's like, well,
right.
like,
I mean, they all wind up in the same place, but how did you get there, right?
Yeah.
Like you know.
yeah. So they're all praying at the same time. There's obviously something transcendent going on there with them,
Right.
but at the same time, there's like again, it's really going to depend on the narrative.
Well, I mean, it's not. I mean, like, the parents are like, you know, why are we selling our house? Ramy's gonna pay for it. And Ramy's like about to lose his life over a diamond.
Yeah, and giving
watch.
all his money away.
Yeah.
And right.
And giving all his money away.
Right.
Yeah.
Everyone except for maybe Dina is having like a really emotional response to what's happening, right? Dina seems like okay, maybe her emotional crash happened a couple episodes back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So she's like, you know,
Yeah.
kind of landed in this place where I'm like, I'm really just looking for stability, right? I'm trying to figure out, you know, my career, but I love this guy. You know,
I mean,
I want to settle down.
but she's like,
Well, they want to get married.
well,
I mean,
that's the other thing. It's like from everything we've seen from them so far, there's a certain sense of like, do these people have anything in common? Do these people actually have anything in common here, or are they?
well, I don't
not that
think.
I think
I don't
that's
think that-
important, but
I think that they have to have some things in common.
Well, I mean, they don't have a shared worldview though.
Right. I think that's. But doesn't that happen a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like one person will be like, well, my wife was the spiritual one.
well,
right?
she was like, she invited him on a date, and they're like, wait, right?
Yeah.
Am I wrong? Am I getting guys mixed up?
No.
No, she went on a date with him.
Yeah. Well, first she jumped his bones.
Yes.
And then.
And then
and
he
then
had
they
a little,
went.
and then he had a little flirt with her mom.
Right.
But like, yeah, and so now they're like, I guess trying to do it right.
Yeah. But they are very different.
Yeah. So again, it's so from a narrative perspective, for me, this feels like a cliffhanger ending,
Yeah.
and more than just in a way of is Ramy going to get killed by these Jewish
Really?
mafia
Okay.
types, right?
Right.
It's a cliffhanger as far as like, well, what does that last scene mean for season 4?
Right.
Are these is everyone going to come back as like well-adjusted people and have like a happy ending now?
Right.
I mean, that doesn't happen.
Yes.
No.
Season 1 was a time jump,
I doubt that.
right? Like I'm sorry. So the first episode of season 3 was a time jump
Yeah.
from what happened at the end of season 2.
Yes.
Right. It's like a lot of time has progressed. You know, Zainab has had a baby. We don't know that in episode 1, but we find out later on. And you know, they are really good about picking up the story, and not having to like fill in every detail. Right. I guess that's like a George Lucas thing. George Lucas didn't care if you didn't know the backstory. He would just throw a character out there.
Yeah.
And you would be like, oh, well, where did this Boba Fett character come from? You know, like, there's a lot of mystery behind it.
He's a Mandalorian. It's like,
Right.
what's
Yeah.
that? They're from Mandalore. It's like, what are they like? They're like him.
Yeah.
They look like him. They all dress like that. Yeah, so, you know, they're good about that, right? Like, you don't know you get ideas throughout the season of how Ramy like became successful and you know
right.
how the relationship with Ayala and Yuval and everybody like progressed and how they got to this point. But you know, if you were looking for like God in the background, right? Like you can see it all being maneuvered, right? I think there was one episode. It was the Halal Brothers one. What was it? Merchants in Medina.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! like it's first of all you're seeing that hit too close. That hit the Halal Brothers and that like
Yeah.
that all hit way
Oh
too
my
close home for me. Like
Which part?
well, I mean, I have to be careful here. Sometimes in Christianity, you can have these kind of mega personalities who are like really, really dynamic, and they come off as being like really, you know, spiritual and dynamic and pious, you know, but in the background, they're like, you're going to give me 10% of your, you know what I mean? 10% of your merch, and, you know, super, super charismatic and
You
we
performers,
we
you
don't-
mean the...
No. The shake mill.
The great white shake is what
the
they call
great
it.
white shake,
Performer,
right?
okay.
Yeah, and the song, right?
I love the song.
You know, I think the whole thing is like they're at Muslim, you know, they're at Muslim Fest or something.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that,
yeah.
right? Like
That's great. Oh my god.
it just reminded me of going to like you know back in the 2000s there was a Choir of the Fire like this stadium thing. Where you know they'd get like Christians together, and this guy would get up and he'd talk through the whole thing, and somebody would give a message, and you know it's very rah
and then
rah,
someone's
right?
prophesying over somebody else.
Yeah.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
So
Like the whole Todd Bentley thing.
yeah, like
There's so many. It's
so many, right? And you know you're watching it, and I'm like, oh my jaw is kind of on the floor watching this episode, going, oh my gosh, you know that's the last thing I would have expected for you know a direction for this show to go in, but it's everywhere. You know, it makes you feel like, oh wow, there's like shenanigans going on in every religion.
yeah.
Right? Like,
It's somewhat comforting.
Religion
Yeah.
is susceptible to all of this. Like anyone can watch any of these episodes and be like, "Yep, totally relatable."
and I loved at the end too when they showed the video for the song. I don't remember what the song was.
Yep.
And the great
music
white,
video.
the great white shake is like singing along with
Yep.
them, and you know, like he's got his own
gosh,
part,
that was
like
amazing.
spoken word part.
Well, and I think Mo didn't have as much to do in this season, but he shone as bright as usual, especially in that episode. There's
You just love Mo.
I love Mo. So first you've got that moment where there's the Quran competition,
Yeah.
which is encouraging his son to win first place in,
Right.
and then there's this kind of admission that he's a hypocrite and kind of been pushing his son to be more consistent, but then you have that moment where Ramy explains to the Jewish guy, "There's no, don't worry, it's perfect that you're here because they're gonna like start trying to convert you to Islam, and then they'll look down, see the diamond, and be like, how much is that?"
Oh yeah.
And then Mo comes over and it does exactly
Yeah.
I like that. What's, you have a size 13?
that. Yeah.
That was great. Oh man.
That is so funny.
Yeah, I think the whole connection to Yuval and the you know what he's going through. It seems like everybody's going through some kind of I'm not doing the right thing, right? I'm not living my life. I'm not living my life the right way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had really was kind of sucked into Dina's story because I know a lot of people who have these professional lives, right? And then they get them and they don't want them, you know, or you know, she just like literally has this moment where she self-sabotages just like Ramy does.
Yeah.
Right? So she's the one who's trying so hard to not be like her family. She does exactly what they do. You know, Yuval, same thing. You know, I'm out, right? Like at the worst possible moment, I'm out. Forget the consequences, you know. And in the finale, you're watching the parents kind of go to this thing where they're like, we don't care anymore. We have nothing to lose. Our son's going to pay for it all.
Yeah.
You know, everything we believed is a lie about, you know, this life in America, and we're smashing the dishes and all that stuff. That kind of reminds me actually of like my parents were at that place where they were like, America was awful. Our time in America was awful. We didn't like it, and you know, for what? Right? Like we gave it all up for hot dogs, you know, like our kids are not who we wanted them to be. our lives didn't turn out the way that we wanted.
Yeah.
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 But I think it's also like the worst thing in life is unmet expectations, right?
Sure.
So when your expectations are, I'll go to a place and everything will be like perfect, you know, or everything's going to work out the way that I want it to be. And, you know, it's not tempered with like, hey, we're immigrants. We have to start all over again, you know? So
or
yeah.
like it's just, or like the substitution of values, I guess.
Yeah, I think he kind of brings that up. Like,
No, that he
Farouk definitely brings
fully
that up.
brings it. That's
right?
what he says. It's like,
you know,
I just cared about money and hot dogs and like
Yeah,
wealth, and now I need to return to Islam and to God.
right.
And there's actually the kind of a twofold thing happening there, because there's that heartbreaking scene. It's like, we've been visitors for 35 years.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's kind of built into their mindset a little bit as well. Like, this is a foreign land with, you know, foreign people with foreign food. So, you know, they're both treated like foreigners, but they also kind of have this almost self-imposed mindset of being
Right.
only visitors as well.
Right.
True.
Yeah.
As opposed to-
Which is a little bit built into Islamic orthodoxy as well, which, you know, to be fair, there's a certain sense
Yeah.
of that in Christianity too, that we're strangers and exiles on the earth.
Sure.
But the difference in Islam is you wouldn't be a stranger and an exile in a true Muslim country.
Right.
And then there is a difference in theology
Sure.
that.
I mean, Christianity, you know, was the dominant religion here. I mean, whatever it is now, it's not. It's definitely not Islam, right? We don't like Islam is such a cultural dynamic force in the countries that you know practice it as a majority religion. So, you know, whereas the United States really isn't like that. But I think you could say that for any country that like is, say, primarily Christian. I mean, you know, their heritage being Christian or something like that. Like go to Germany, all the old buildings are churches. You know, you're from the UK,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's just this rich kind of Christian tradition that you can't really run away from, and any other tradition that comes, it doesn't really connect. You know, with like let's just say the architecture,
Right.
You know what I mean, or the street names, or
Sure.
the food that's being sold, or the traditions of a specific town, or something like that.
So, but the big difference again is for Protestant Christianity is there is a certain extent that you're not quite bought into where you are bought into where you live. You're not like fully bought in. You understand you're living for something different, bigger than
Sure.
America or England or Turkey or Mexico or wherever you find yourself.
Right.
And you can you're encouraged, but the difference is if I leave England or America, if I leave America with its sort of Christian heritage and go live in Japan, there's no certain sense of, oh gosh, I'm leaving Christian lands and heritage for a non-Christian land and heritage.
No, that's not.
Right.
Whereas that is built into some extent in Islam.
Yeah.
Because you've very much got this unity of, you know, church, state, territory, everything. So there is an extra bit of pressure on people leaving Muslim countries to, like, you know, you never really belong.
Yeah.
So you never really belong there.
And it's a moral dysphoria more than anything else. Like, yeah, I don't know, like more than just how people dress or talk or any of that. It's like a sense of a less moral being in a less moral land. Less halal. All
Yeah.
of that. Like, it's just.
Well, I mean, I sat next to a kid who I was coming back from Turkey, my last trip to Turkey. I sat next to this kid from Yemen who was going to go study in America, in California. And he was trying to wrap his head around, like, he was just asking me all kinds of questions about what California is like. And, you know, you know, I told him about everything from, like, Legoland to, you know, the situation in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And, you know, how people live on the West Coast and how people live on the East Coast. And, you know, he really was kind of like at, you know, this what does intersecting with this culture look like?
Uh-huh.
But I mean, this kid was decked out in Nike, he had an iPhone. You know, like you think that it's going to be a lot more like it's going to be much more different, but in some ways you've already kind of you know intersected with it, right?
Yeah.
Like, Nike's based in Oregon. It's not based in Dubai, right? Like you know the values
that's the whole
the values of those the things that you've come into contact with, like Apple or Nike or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it's more than just, you know, whether or not it's moral. I think it's like it's just so different, you know. Like
Okay.
I was explaining to him like, all right, well, there are a ton of gay people in San Francisco. It's like people move to San Francisco because, you know, because of its gay population, right? Like they want that, and his eyes were like bugged out, right? But I don't think it was because it was moral, because I didn't get a sense from him that he was very Muslim, you know, like it wasn't like a hard his level of observance wasn't like that. He's just a kid, like a college kid, and then moving to another place where you're like, hey, when I go to Turkey, there's no San Francisco in Turkey, right? It's because of
everything is uniform and
yeah. Well, I mean, it's a Muslim country, you know, so you know it's because of the religion, but it's not just because of the religion. It's also the culture. It's how it all plays out, you know. And when they look at America, they like to blame America for a lot of things like political and. You know, America's hands are not clean by any stretch of the imagination in the stretch of history. But, you know, to look at that one country and say, well, that country's got us, right? Well, what's your standard? You know?
Yeah, but these are the assumptions that people operate off of.
And I think from the show Ramy's perspective, I think they actually do a really good job of showcasing that.
Yeah.
That America is not a land of immorality, where Egypt is a land of virtue and
right. I mean, Shadi is.
But
like,
they
his story. Is
yeah.
They show how people
he does
feel
every
about it.
drug, you know.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. But they're definitely even that's true. They're displaying the true from like an outsider's audience perspective, but then from the characters' perspectives and in the way that they interact with each other, they don't see that, they don't understand that. They're just processing that, which is why in this episode, in the last episode, everyone is just all their thoughts are just catching up with them as to how they've been living.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that the only
Is the
person who reflects
prostitute.
any kind of Christianity is the prostitute, right?
We finally got a Christian character. Yay!
Yay!
And in the end, she steals from him, right?
Yeah.
Kind of a favor. No.
Yeah, you're gonna have to make a choice, right?
And there's still kind of the person that kind of brings him to God in the end too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting twist on it, but you know, from a Christian perspective, you're looking at what everyone's going through, and you're like, gosh, it just screams at you. You know, Ramy's on that beach, crying out to God, right? And you know, me thinking in my heart what that situation would have been like if you were crying out to Jesus, you know, as opposed to, you know, kind of wondering if God is talking to you and putting yourself
Begging for him to talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't want to deem to say that, you know, God can't talk to whoever he doesn't want to talk to. It's just when you're a Christian, there's an open channel. You know, we believe that there's an open channel, right? And that when you talk to Jesus, you're talking to God, and he definitely talks back, right? So you're not just going to sit there wondering, like, what was that? Unless you're on mushrooms like his parents and seeing a dog.
So,
gosh, this mug is leaking. I just want to put it out there.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just see how much of it can leak out this episode.
it's like a water timer.
I know, right?
So,
well, we're done.
So I think let's circle back around that to a minute. But I think my favorite character arc and my favorite character this season was Dina.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dina's story was the most fun to watch. But that group therapy session episode had me like curled up in a ball in embarrassment watching that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was tough.
Oh my gosh.
I want to say, like, oh, that's like, it's not fair to
the accents.
therapies.
It's guys talking like he's from
And
India.
therapists, but it was
And
super
therapist
funny.
is just like, just roll with it.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a difference between there's actually a difference between Ramy and the Muslim Otherhood show we went to.
Yeah.
I would say therapy in that stand-up show we went to in New York was very much looked on as the sort of solution itself.
Right.
Where at least in what we've seen from Ramy so far, it's seen as kind of another sort of empty religion,
Right.
essentially.
Yeah.
That can't actually answer
Right.
the person's questions.
Right.
And again, just like the constant cultural disconnect. Like, Western therapy cannot help this Muslim family. Just can't. And I do think
In the show.
I would say that is true generally. Is that, yeah.
So
There's a void.
So speaking of Muslim therapy.
Yeah.
My favorite episode this season was definitely episode 9, and it had just these like two profound monologues in it.
Oh, when he's in the group.
Yeah, so Ramy is explaining how Ramy is in this kind of group, this sex addicts support group, which he's not really talking about that. He's just talking about, like, I'd say in this whole show, Ramy's sex problem is just like a metaphor for his other problems.
Sure.
But especially in this scene.
Right.
And he's just talking about how he thinks he's a bad person and he wanted to try and be good, but he just can't muster it up for himself, and he can't seem to do what's good, and then he realizes his parents are crazy too, and that he always thought they were okay, because they had God, but really they're just scared of God, and he's anxious about God, and therefore he's anxious about absolutely everything, and then in the final episode he says, I'm scared of God, so I've never been able to love God.
Right.
And oh my word, it's like if I was writing the sort of like, sappiest Christian TV movie where somebody has kind of a come to faith moment and explains the entire human condition, I couldn't have done that any better. Right? Like Christian writers, that Ramy's monologue almost perfectly epitomizes the problems the New Testament is trying to solve and like outline specifically
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Right.
And you watch Christian movies, they'll never express a fraction of the depth we just saw in Ramy.
Right.
It's because they're not prepared to get real enough to actually
They're not.
deal with that kind of stuff, and therefore they can't have these kinds of conversations.
Well, I mean, I think the hard part, particularly among Christian audiences, is if it comes off as too edgy, no one will buy it. That's the problem you've had in, like, say, Christian music, for instance. That's why you see some of these rappers, like Christian rappers, are actually going there, like talking about the stuff that they're struggling with, and they're breaking out of the idea of this is what you're gonna play on, like, Star, or The Fish, or
That just boils down to like how seriously Christians are willing to take the Bible itself, and I would say that someone who doesn't want to take it that seriously would just prefer to cover everything up. But if someone's taking the Bible seriously, then like, and what it says, like James mentioned in the New Testament especially, then they would be you would see something like what we saw in this scene and in that episode.
I mean, I could identify with what he was going through, in season 3. I tried to be good and I couldn't, so I'm just gonna be bad. I'm just gonna do what I want, because why bother? You know, that's that kind of. I think you said it in season when we talk about the season 2. One of us said it. I can't remember that. You know, Ramy is turning into Nassim, right? You know, a guy with a ton of like underlying problems, angst, like sexual frustrations and all that other stuff, and then on top of that, he's becoming cynical. You know, they're even in the same like industry, you know, and it becomes about the money and how people perceive you and stuff. And you know, Islam has its perspective on that, but Christianity definitely, you know, weighs in on, you know, how you're supposed to look at money, right? And how you're supposed to look at like your sense of pride and what false humility is like, and you know what anger at God looks like. That's all throughout the New Testament. I mean, not just the New Testament; it's all throughout the Bible.
So, what I'm making a bit of a prediction here from what I've seen of you know, I'm trying to kind of like work out the actual worldview of Ramy the writer, not just Ramy the character. But I think what you see, I think what the worldview you see in Ramy is that people are broken from the inside, right? That's the way, and there is a God. People are broken from the inside, and these external religious rituals don't necessarily really help that.
No.
And so a lot of people who and so everybody, the religious solution is just to you know, stay away from the bad, surround yourself with good, and then you'll be good. And that has not worked for Ramy, and that's not worked for any of the characters in the show. So the sort of traditionalist religion doesn't work. Then season 2, what he tries is connecting to sincere, genuine religion by finding another person who has that connection. And I think what's supposed to be happening now is that he's now trying to get that connection to God himself, rather than through someone who stands in the way between him and God.
Right.
That's what I think the sort of overarching worldview of the show is communicating. I still have no idea what the Ramy versus God is like exactly, and how a person actually lives righteously in front of that God. I don't know what real world, really connected to God Ramy is supposed to look like in season 4.
Yeah, well, they do a lot of profiles in season 3 of like different kinds of Muslims, right? Like Dennis, you know, who's been in jail for like a year now and has been studying Islam and is just so hardcore, you know, and the point where like I don't do that Sufi stuff, man. Like that's not cool. And he goes to go tell him about the, you know, Boomer died, right? Well, dogs are not haram, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Halal.
Yeah.
You know, so
And he's like,
you know,
betrayal.
right. And then you have like a Mo, you know, everything's okay. Mo can figure it out because Mo can figure out a way to make whatever he wants, you know, okay. And then there's his mom and his dad and Dina and Dina's like guy and you know, it's just this long like great spread of that.
I think that where they're gonna go is a merciful God who is all forgiving and nobody's really outside, like all these characters aren't really everyone can enter into that all merciful nature. And then I also think that they are also hinting at, like, they had some pretty serious questions about predestination and free will and choice. And so, like, also, like, you know,
I mean, Ramy believes under that point that he didn't have to choose. God chose for him.
Right. And yet we can all see, like, that all his choices have led to, that he does have free will and that he's made choices and they've led to consequences.
Right. and he doesn't take responsibility for his
And
actions.
yeah.
Right. Well, I mean that's also. A
And
theme
then
of,
like, but I don't know, like, and then
the kid.
yeah, like
the house. The kid. He finds out, and then he blames Ayala. Right. He
Yeah.
didn't do anything.
yeah.
Dude, that was your fault.
Mm-hmm,
You stole the kid's bike.
mm-hmm.
If you hadn't stolen the kid's bike, they would have chased you. Nothing would have happened. And then on top of that, when you went to the border, you were like, they stole my passport, right? Like, you put the kid in that situation and didn't own it. You
Or
know?
just like he has a baby now, and it seems like that's what's
right. No, I mean
one of the big forces pushing him to like
in that opening
find God.
opening dialogue and see in the finale.
Yeah.
He's like, I really deserve to see her. Right, it's in Islam, right? Like he's making it all up.
I think it's like free will. God is the God that allows for free will for sure, and like allows for sin to like take place. But he's also gonna like the predestination part is we're all gonna come to him because he's so merciful. I think that's what they're going.
I think they could do a lot of different things with the
and like especially through like.
I think he could die.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think he could die, and I think that would be one way that they could, I read an article where they said Ramy Youssef said season 4 is it, right? There's no season 5 that his Ramy's story will be over in season 4. Like that's the series will come to an end. So it's the last season.
Yeah.
Right? According to him.
Dang, no, I don't want him to die, man.
Well, I mean, a lot of things could happen, and we want to look at it and be like, okay, well, he's going to make up with Zainab, and everyone's going to find their way, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you could look at it.
Yeah, that's what I hope. I want him to get back with Zainab, have his little family.
Right.
The parents, I want them to like.
Or something,
be true
where
to their
he's
culture.
like, he's her dad, and, maybe they don't.
I don't know about Dina and her boy. I don't know about that. I don't.
Actually, I feel better about that than I do about him and Zainab.
Really?
Well, I mean, people a lot of times will marry their opposite.
No, and that's not even what I'm saying. It's more so
one talks and the other one, sits there. And
it feels like I'm just gonna stop pursuing and just settle for something that seems more acceptable. I mean, just acceptable.
Honestly, so with that, what honestly freaked me out in the finale, which I don't think is necessarily supposed to freak me out, is that you have Ramy's dad, you've got Dina's fiance, Dina and Mesa, and in that last scene, their kind of individuality, these amazing personalities are all just kind of like erased in their prayers, like. Mesa and Dina are like covering up, like Dina's wearing all black, and it's like, where'd they go, kind of thing. And so there's a certain sense of, I think a lot of people are going to see the beauty and okay, you're all part of something bigger here.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's also a very traditional moment. I mean, like they said they want to get married, and the family is praying with the new young couple.
Yeah, it's like ritualistic.
Well, yeah. I mean, when my brother got married, my brother is not, at all Muslim. My sister-in-law is not, at all. I mean, I guess they might say that they're Muslim, but they're not practicing Muslims at all, And, but when they got married, my father hired somebody to come and cook for like 3 days, and they hired an imam, and he came, and they did the whole thing in the living room, know. And it was very much like my sister-in-law's all dressed in traditional stuff. And my brother's wearing like things that, I mean, he just would never wear any of those things.
It seems like it's all of the all the events that any human, I guess, would agree that is like big and significant and powerful, like a marriage, like having a baby, like all these big things that make us humans. I think those are the moments when like
even
people want to grab death, boomer, yeah, exactly. Like all these things that make people humans. I think that's where you would find what the show would be suggesting. That's where you're gonna want to be most connected to God.
Yeah. So yes,
but not in like your daily menial life. I
Right,
guess.
and so what I'm saying is that it's not so much they're connecting with God and those that makes perfect sense, but the way they connect with God in that scene is like there's this, you don't really hear Ramy's question to God. I guess you kind of do from the preceding scene to some extent. Like what Ramy's, I guess what everyone's thinking because they've expressed it through the episode. But I want to hear, I want to hear the conversation between Dina and what does Dina say to God? What does Mesa say to God? What does Farouk say to God? Like it's like I'd be equally as freaked out if they were ordering like the Hail Mary. It's not that they look too Muslim doing it. It's more a case it just kind of offends my Protestant sensibilities in this. But that said, I don't believe that the answer to the worldview is the worldview the show's promoting is just shut up, sacrifice your individuality and look more Muslim, because somebody with that mindset could never produce this show.
Right.
Sacrifice your individuality and look more. Oh no! I think that's just a genuine observation of what you were saying, Ivar. Is that like this is just what people do, like in big moments of life, people just like want to feel more religious.
Well, I mean, think about it.
Closer to God through that. It's just what people do.
This Uncle Nassim comes clean in the
Oh
only
my
way
gosh,
that
was
only
such
way
a
that he
good
could possibly
episode.
come
We didn't
clean,
talk about that.
right? With the only person that he could I mean, it's all because he's paranoid, right?
Yeah.
About who would know, after watching the feedback on his YouTube video and all this other stuff.
That was such a good episode.
That was such a good episode, right? And, his response to her thing, like, I didn't take the bar, right? So he discloses something deeply, deeply personal and a secret, right?
Secret.
He's not really disclosing it, but in the only way that he could possibly, right?
Which I want to maybe, I don't know if we have time, like, what did he mean? I just wanted some sugar. I was alone and an immigrant and all I wanted was some sugar. I'm like very curious about what that means. But anyway, yeah, he tells her and she's
and her
like,
response is, I didn't take the bar.
we're all hypocrites.
Right? She says, that's her lie, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's been walking around with that lie. And his response is, oh, it's perfect. That means you're supposed to,
go get married.
You can finally
go be a mom.
You can finally go do what you're supposed to do.
is
You can go be a mom, right? Like stay home and right. So there's expectations on each one of these characters of how they're supposed to behave, right? And they're placed on them from their Islam and their culture and the world around them, right? Like even the characters around Ramy, okay. Ahmed is like you're like a devil now, right? Steve. Steve with like no morals. Steve is like you're an evil dude.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even Mo is like still Mo.
Yes, that was amazing. The episode about Ahmed, his multiple wives.
Yes.
And,
Okay. Let's pause and talk about polygamy again.
Yeah. Right.
The episode with Nassim was amazing as well. Anyway.
And how does Mo know like the guy? He's like it totally strikes me as the guy who knows everyone, right? So you want to talk about polygamy? I got a guy.
Yeah.
Right. I think at some point he's like, oh, you need a quickie marriage? I know a guy, right? Like I know how to call, man.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, he's not a lot in this. He's not in this a lot.
No.
But that was because
he's great.
I'm pretty sure he was filming his own show.
Yeah.
So that's why we don't have the Sheikh. Mahershala Ali is not in it because he's like filming Marvel movies and and all the other things that he's filming. So
got it.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah. Although I'm not quite sure what he would have done in this season anyway.
Well, I mean, I think you want to see characters in it, and you're like, well, you don't really. You're right. The way they wrote season 3, they don't need him. Right. And they even wrote him out because she's like, I don't agree with what my thought. Like he's in Africa now, and we're not even talking to each other.
Because why? I missed that part.
Well, when she's talking to the spiritual, like the older woman.
Yeah.
At the Sufi mosque.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's like, you should tell Ramy, you know,
Uh-huh.
and who comes up? Was it Nassim? Who comes up to her and says, "You should talk to your father" or something. I want to talk to your father.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think
it is Nazim.
I think it's Nassim, and she says, "Well, I don't even, you know,
He's
my dad's in Africa on sabbatical, and we're not even really communicating now."
Gotcha.
Right. So, yeah, they wrote him out.
Yeah. Which again, it's like I'm not quite sure what role he would even have in this because Ramy only talks to Zainab in the last episode.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it's like kind of weird if he's there as well.
Right. Well, you know, everybody has to be themselves. You know.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting that she talked about abortion. That's like
Sounds like it was a premise.
that was really interesting. You know, from a religious standpoint, they went there.
Yeah.
You know, they went there and discussed like how the grounds under which a Muslim woman would have a divorce. You know, she's devout. It
sounds like she believes that there's a lot of that it's a very that Islam is feminist.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah.
Islam is feminist. You know, she's the one that courted Ramy. She's
Yeah.
the one that was like, I'm interested in him.
Mm-hmm.
Get me a seat with him. He didn't pursue her to begin with. And so the dad was like, all right, girl, you got it.
Right.
So it's like...
But the interest, again...
women take the initiative.
Yeah, so... And it's interesting because you do have those versions of Islam out there, right? You've got Zainab on one hand, and then you've got Mo on the other hand.
Mm-hmm.
And... sorry to say this, but Mo knows the sources better than she does.
Sure. Written,
Right.
scripture-wise, yes.
Yeah.
Funny. Mo doesn't know a lot.
Yeah, he's like, Mo has a better grasp of the source material.
Yeah.
Like, what she's appealing to is probably a closer representation of what's actually, like, righteous and good, to some extent. But Mo knows his hadith and
Right.
Quran better than she does.
Right.
And that's an interesting thing. Because, again, it's kind of getting at, okay, well, what is the worldview of this show? It's not afraid to, like, hold a light up to things that happen in the Islamosphere and, like, have people think about it. And, like, again, the whole polygamy episode.
Oh, yeah.
That was not a promotion of polygamy.
No.
Right. No. You know, I think it's interesting because you can see the kind of clash that the woman who wanted to be, and you know, the other woman in the second wife, like her entire dynamic was very, like, I've never personally met a Muslim who wanted that. You know, like I've never met a Muslim who had that. You know, I've never seen that.
That you know of.
That I know of, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, wanted it is a different story. But, you know, actually had it, like...
I've known a few. But it always, like, surprises me when it happens. Like, it's like a woman and her husband's not around much. And then you find, okay, well, her husband lives in a different state half the time.
Right.
And then with her the other half the time.
Right.
Because it's not like the Mormon sister wives thing where all the women, like, live together in one place.
Oh, man, my man had 4 houses, though. They owned half the block. Like, he had 4 wives, he had 4 houses.
Doing it right.
Right. That's so funny when Steve was like, so do you guys all do it? Did you guys all have sex together? Get this shaitan out of my house! Get this jinn out of my house! This conversation is over.
So it's like, again, it's like a really amazing show because it's not like, again, Ramy Youssef is Muslim. He's like asking, kind of pointing stuff out that's kind of like amiss, both in the Islam world and in the source materials, and he's not apologizing for it. He's not trying to resolve it with a character in the story who says, well, the true Islam would be this way, and this way. Which, again, is why this is better than freaking Christian TV.
Right.
Because you'd always have you'd always have Pastor McBible who would be like, well, Ramy, the true way to do this is this, and this, right? That character does not exist.
No.
Right.
So like you kind of have to work out the morality of the show from the narrative,
Yeah.
not from a character who states it explicitly. Again, that's one
That's
reason.
a good thing.
It's a good
That's
thing,
awesome.
and that's why a lot of Christian movies suck because you've always got to have a character representing the voice of God.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have that here for sure.
So I want Ramy to meet somebody who represents the voice of God. I kind of want to. I always want to have an off screen though. It's like I don't want the. I kind of don't want the show to have that because, like, I think.
I mean, wouldn't you say that Dad Zainab's father was like that though?
He was very close. He was very close, but he. Yeah, but he was, but he didn't. But I'd say in that last episode of season 2, he is just a man.
Well, yeah, and he would also not presume to say that he was speaking for God.
Right.
Right. So, in a Christian sense, you hear people who like.
I mean, he even had that. It was like, and you know the will of the prophet. It's like not saying that he knows the will of God.
Right.
It's like
Right.
you know the will of God and you know the will of the prophet.
Right.
So he's like questioning those things as well.
Right.
So
But
he's a good guy, and he definitely represents the voice of God more than anyone else in the show does. But I think he's ultimately presented as a finite man who just can't deal with Ramy, right? You are beyond my capacity to deal with.
Right.
That's not the voice of God.
Right.
no, well,
That's funny
not
because
in Christianity.
like he's a spiritual force. And Boomer.
Yeah.
Boomer's the other spiritual force.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, seriously, they have like Ramy's like she saw me.
Yeah.
She saw me. She understood me. You know what I mean? I felt guilty around the dog.
Right.
Like I felt guilty about what I exposed the sins I did in front of the dog.
Yeah.
Because it loved him.
Right, because it loved it.
Wait, does
It's
the dog in the show represent God?
At the
What?
one point the dog is sitting there in the
They're
chair
praying
while
to the
they're
dog.
praying.
They're praying to the God.
Like, it's crazy.
And okay, here it is because they're praying and they see the
everything.
dog.
And he has his moment at the dog's grave, and right.
And what's the dog's attitude? The dog's attitude is just looks at me with those attitudes of love, and that made me feel guilty and want to be better.
Right.
Right. It wasn't that the dog was threatening to punish him.
Right.
It was that the dog genuinely loved him.
Right.
And that love is transformative.
It's totally what happened. Like the dog is representative of a spiritual force. Right?
A Muslim show, a show written by Muslims,
It's crazy.
has God represented by a dog.
Right.
yeah.
It's nuts.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Huh, okay.
And it's crazy because the dog is the one who has seen the afterlife, right? If it's not God, like, the dog died.
The dog died
Because of his sin, right? Like him, doing something he was,
Yeah.
like
Haram.
completely haram, and the dog is the one sitting in the chair at the end. You know what I mean? During the prayers.
Resurrected, almost you could say.
Where is this going?
He's a force ghost.
Oh yeah. So from a Christian perspective, our sin is what killed God.
Yeah.
Our sins would kill God.
It's crazy.
All right, there's no way that's, just to be clear for any Muslims listening, we don't believe that God ceased existing. The second person of the Trinity, the Son, took on human flesh so that he could die. All right, it's not that God stopped existing, but that's.
It's nuts, isn't it?
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
But it's like in that last scene though, they look at each other as if they both see the dog.
They do both see him.
Right?
Right. And you don't know, like, you're left guessing, like, it's the drugs, right? How are they having, like, a joint hallucination, right? Like, listen, I've had hallucinations. it's never been like that, right? Like, we're both seeing the same thing at the same time. I think there's a lot of suggestion.
Well,
in
did
those
they both see it at the same time? I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of
Nysa saw him.
There's a lot of.
Seems like she did.
Seems like she did. For me, it was also been
they
like,
were
what are you
totally
doing? She's
hinting
praying.
at that. You know what I mean?
Maybe she did. Yeah.
So I was watching this because this is the second time I watched it. There's a scene. There's like a the pan out that starts that scene, right? And you see Dina praying, right, and her mom and the dad, and while he's like has his eyes closed and he's reciting, her eyes are open. So I think she's been staring at the dog the whole time.
Oh my gosh.
And then he opens his eyes and looks
then
at her, right? And she looks at him and she's like
maybe that was super intentional and that's like really well done.
Well, I mean, if
really
it's
well
intentional or not, it turned out totally plays out that way. You go back and you look at that pan shot, she's totally staring at something.
Yeah.
So two questions for Ramy. Right. Question one.
It's poop.
Is not that again? I feel like even if that was the answer, he wouldn't answer it. But the questions I would have is one: what would the grandfather have said if he didn't die in season one? And question two: did Mesa see the dog?
Yeah. Mesa had for him to see the dog, right?
Yeah.
Like, you could have totally. We definitely saw the dog. Right?
Yeah.
The audience definitely saw the dog.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. Dog, God spelled backward, like it's
all very subliminal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but again, I actually think obviously, dog dying for Ramy's sin, Jesus connection. There's no way they planned that.
No.
And that's not what they're trying to communicate. However, what I actually think they are doing here is, what and why did Masha Allah Ali give him the dog in the first place? It was to learn about God.
Yeah,
He said,
exactly.
"This dog will teach you."
Right, this dog teaches you, right?
This dog.
So basically, what the dog. So Ramy is scared of God, and it's in the same scene. He's talking about how he's scared of God, so he can never love God. But then the dog always loved him, and that motivated him
unconditionally, right? The dog unconditionally loved him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I do. I just in general.
And if you think about it, everybody loved the dog.
Yeah.
Dennis loved the dog. Farouk loved the dog. Farouk didn't want to give the dog back, right? Ramy loved the dog. Everyone, the dog is like the one thing that everyone can agree on, right? Like.
Yes.
So that's fascinating. That is definitely there. We're not imagining that.
No, we're not. It's totally there. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember watching it going, they're treating the dog like it's. I mean,
like they're praying to the dog.
It's not praying to the dog, but it's like it's definitely the. I mean, as a Christian, you would look at it and go, the Holy Spirit is said, like kind of using the dog as like a way to communicate with the people around them,
Right.
But in Islam, you wouldn't say that.
No.
Right? So the dog has a different connotation than you would look at it in Christianity. You know what I mean? You'd be like, okay, I don't know. Like you can talk to many believers and they'll be like, there's this situation or, something happened and I felt God working through the situation and, there's a cat like my wife got me a cat because I'm too grouchy, right? No, totally. I have 6 kids. I got a lot of reason to be grouchy. But the cat was like a whole thing that became a catalyst for something else in our house, right?
Uh-huh.
I remember when we got our dog, it was during the pandemic, and I was praying. I mean, this is kind of an aside, but I was praying for my kids because they were so bored during the pandemic, and I did not want a dog. I did not want a dog, And I'm sitting there and I'm praying with my wife and I'm like, please help us to get these kids through this pandemic and maybe we could like get them a dog. And I'm like, ooh, I don't want a dog, but there it is. I knew, I kind of felt it deep within me, right? Like we have to go get a dog, And this dog, digs on my back. I mean, it's a side.
We
side
love our
story.
pets.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's just the way that you can look at a spiritual situation from the outside as a Christian and say, okay, I saw God working in that, right? But you wouldn't necessarily attribute it to being like, it's God.
Right, like the dogs.
You know what I mean? Like, it's God, moving a circumstance. In this, right?
No, in
Like,
this...
particularly at the end when the dog's sitting at in the chair, you're like, what is that? Like, what are they trying to say here?
I thought maybe, like, they missed the dog and they're on shrooms, but, like...
I mean,
that's there, but...
all that's there,
It's
but...
more than that.
Right.
Okay, so, but here's the thing.
Been 20 minutes
on the dog. No, this is the point of the show, right?
Yeah.
Like we found the core.
Yeah, right. You can go back and edit out the first, like, half hour.
This is the main thing. But this is, again, I think to a certain extent, this is the way. Where am I going with this? This is kind of the way God speaks through art, because something that I think even the Sufi Muslim can't say here is that if we're right about the dog essentially representing God in the show, which we're right about that.
Or God's character?
There's no
God's
way
character,
we're not,
at least.
I just want to say this. There's no way we're not right about that.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Okay.
That's,
So then, how is that packaged? So what the essential literary message of that is here, the moral message of this, whether they realize this or not, is the average Muslim sees dog and thinks unclean. And in this show, it's, no, this thing you'd normally think is unclean and approachable is actually where you're actually going to find God.
Right.
And how, like, weirdly biblical is that?
Right.
That the stone that the builders rejected becomes the cornerstone.
Sure.
There's
It's a biblical reference.
So it's a biblical principle.
Well,
It's
yeah.
not-
Even the prostitute, in some ways, is still kind of like you're gonna have to make a choice, right? Like, she's there representing Christianity, and she takes the watch, right? That sets him.
Now
on
we
this
don't know.
whole-
She's trying to help or harm, but
Well,
or she was like, you know what? I need the watch. He doesn't need the watch.
Or maybe.
but she's the spiritual one. That's my point, right? Like,
Sure.
she's sitting there talking to him about his issues.
Well, she's the one that reminded him that he was looking for
really
God.
looking for God, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But who else talks to prostitutes in the scriptures?
Jesus.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, who, where is he talks to, Ramy talks to a prostitute by the grave of a dog, but, Jesus goes and talks to a prostitute by a well, and has other encounters with prostitutes. So the prostitute is, like, in the New Testament in particular, or even in the Old Testament, these things happen around prostitutes that, are like situations where God's will is being done, right? So Ramy's sitting there, like, talking to this prostitute, and God's will is being done there, right? Like, he's breaking away from, the sinful,
For
like,
sure.
awfulness of who he had embraced, right?
For sure, he's
Like,
gonna have
he's
to deal with the consequences of that. But like,
well, sure, but
like,
you always have to.
Yeah,
Like, if
everyone
you,
has. Yeah,
if you were a murderer, okay, you murdered somebody, but then you went to prison, and you were on death row, but then you became a believer. You still have to deal with the consequences of what you did,
the past.
right?
Yeah.
But you're looking at Ramy, and he's in this position where it's really, like, very kind of painted like it's out of the New Testament,
Totally,
right?
yeah.
Like, they're sitting there and they're talking about it, and he's talking about God, and he even says it like it was so hot. Like, we were connecting, and we were talking about God, and, she was, like, listening to me, and then we started making out, and then she stole the watch. Right? Right. So, what is going on here, right, with this show?
Yeah, right. There's so much. But, okay, again, this is going to get, like, a little ridiculous here again, but if the two candidates we have for representing the voice of God in this is the sheikh and the dog,
right,
and what and how does that play out? The sheikh is this father figure who sends Ramy this dog to be his teacher, and Ramy's sin kills that teacher.
Right.
I mean,
We're just waiting for the Holy Spirit now.
Well,
Maybe, or maybe that's.
I mean, the whole thing, the way it orchestrated, right? Like, once you finally get into the end of the plot of season 3, it's very and I guess this is where I was going with earlier on, where he's like sitting there on the beach, like praying and pouring his heart out, right? And confessing. You know, we would look at this, like I would look at my own testimony, and I would say, I drove my life into the ground, and I didn't like who I was, and I got in legal trouble, and I finally felt like this conviction that I had sinned, okay? And then I got led to a place where I would accept Jesus, right? Like I heard his voice, I heard him speaking to me, and I became a believer. So from a Christian perspective, you're looking at it going, it's like the Holy Spirit, it's like the Holy Spirit moving his whole life so we can have this moment.
But only after the dog died.
Well, yeah, sure,
Which in the Bible it'd be like the Holy Spirit comes after Jesus dies and ascends.
Oh my gosh, did you just go there?
I just went there. I mean, that's...
No, it is there.
It's there.
I'm just saying what you're saying.
Did they mean to put it there? Probably not, but it's there.
Probably not.
So the what you're seeing is almost like this really kind of Christian expression.
Sure.
In a very Muslim story.
And probably inadvertently so.
Oh, I totally. I mean, I'm not making assumptions that Ramy's like a secret Christian or something.
No.
Ramy Youssef is a secret Christian. Trying to talk to people. Slowly. Yeah.
In the New York apartment somewhere, and I would have gone away with it too because you meddling kids.
Right. And then I stole the bike. And that's going to come in later.
Yeah.
I think, you can see this kind of like, it's a very Old Testament, New Testament kind of dialogue where these situations happen and these people are either, immoral or amoral or with God, and how they all play together and how God orchestrates the circumstances around them to bring about his desired result. And I'm watching this and I'm going, Ramy is having a moment where he's sitting here saying, I've sinned, I've fallen short, right? And I am crying out to God for the next step.
Yeah.
Okay, but what we would do in that instance, right? I mean, when you accepted the Lord, or when you accepted the Lord, or when I accepted, Jesus or whatever, you sit there and you say, okay, look, I understand who God is now. I have a clear revelation of who God is now. And if I take that into context, I understand that my sins are forgiven. And I start to build my life around that.
Yes.
Right? Like who Jesus is and what he says and the things that he's doing. And I'm watching Ramy and I'm thinking, what's the next step for him?
Yeah.
Right? Like what's the next step for him after this moment of just letting it all out? Mm-hmm. Understanding you've made mistakes, seeing the hand of God moving in your life, being brought to tears, being in awe of God and in fear of God and also desiring God all at the same moment, right? Mm-hmm. Like I definitely connected with that. But us watching it from the screen, okay, and getting out of his head and just kind of watching it as, like we are supposed to, like the audience, and going, my gosh, this is a very Christian story.
It is.
This is a very it's just happening in the context of Islam.
Yeah.
Right.
This is one of the most Christian stories I've ever seen, and much more so than any stories produced by Christians in modern memory.
No, sure. And this is very unique. I mean, by all accounts, everything that I've read about this show, it's extremely unique in Islam, right? There are no shows that feature Muslims that are like this.
Yeah.
It's powerful enough of a dialogue and a narrative to cross over and go into popular culture. I mean, the article I read was in Vanity Fair, and another one I read was in Rolling Stone.
No, yeah.
There are exactly zero Christian movies that have ever made it into maybe the Passion of the Christ, like,
Yeah.
you know, and never like with praise, you know, like, oh, Passion of the Christ was such a great movie.
And I guess
right?
if I were to ask you to, like, okay, we're saying there's a very Christian story in a very Muslim setting. Well, what is it that makes it such a Christian story? Because maybe that's what people don't always understand.
Well, I'd say the things that make Ramy more Christian than Muslim, and again, when I say Muslim here, I want to have the caveat that I think the writer Ramy's view is sort of brand of Sufi Islam as much as I can tell, right? So obviously he's not writing this from a Christian perspective, probably, but the thing that makes this more Christian than classical Sunni Islam is that it's clearly showing that it's not showing Islam in its traditional sense as a perfect system. It's showing an imperfect system, and it's showing people who are fundamentally broken from the inside, who need to, again, this fear is something that's built into Sunni Islam, and the message is, well, he just loved me unconditionally, and that caused me to want to be better, and that's Romans. That's it's God's kindness is supposed to lead us to repentance, right? And that is a kind of the consistent New Testament message. Not to say that you can't find it anywhere in Islam, but there's definitely a sense of you should be afraid. There's definitely a sense of you don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, and there's definitely this sort of sense of anxiety about the day of judgment.
I mean,
and so again, so Sufis in general may not often don't operate like that, but I don't think they have any like ground to stand on. Meaning they're not appealing to some text somewhere. They're just kind of appealing to what they essentially hope God is like.
which is loving.
Right?
The text says God is all merciful, for sure. And then
it's more from
the end of the second season, or I don't know if it was in the third season, it's like he's listening to the tape recorder in the car, and it does end with God is love, blah 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 blah. It does say that in like the Islam cassette that teaches you Islam, but it's definitely not like Christianity has got that much more concrete love and mercy and kindness.
Right. It's systematized how that actually works.
I mean, the way that
Jesus.
Yeah.
The dynamic in the Quran is that, judgment is sure and swift and is coming. And the only way that you can escape it is, to somehow appeal to the mercy of Allah, right? In your deeds. But the dynamic in Christianity, while is very similar, the discussion doesn't revolve around that. It revolves around forgiveness and atonement, right? It revolves around like
blood. I mean, like the blood of Jesus.
Well, I mean, I think that the whole point of the blood of Jesus, though, is because God loves you.
Right.
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 It's a sacrificial love.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not like a king sitting on the throne going, all right, you did some good stuff, so I want to chop your head off. Right? I mean, it's definitely like I'm Jesus and I'm getting off my throne and I will die in your place.
Yes.
Right? So we understand that to be a dynamic in Christianity. That is not a dynamic in Islam.
Right.
And not in the Hadith, not anywhere do you see that. It's actually unique to Christianity.
Basically, God taking on your sins.
Right, takes on all your sins. And dies for you, and dies for you, and dies for me, and dies for everyone watching.
In Islam, God is only just the most merciful.
It's more like a field.
But he doesn't take on your sins.
No.
He can be merciful about your sins.
Right.
Well, he doesn't do anything about your sins except tell you what to.
Well, he forgives them. He forgives them.
He forgives them, but based on what you do. Like you're potentially.
And there's no assurance.
It's just not.
And there's no assurance of that.
There's no assurance of it, right? Yeah. So there's a hope of forgiveness.
Right.
And it's hope.
Right.
Right. Hey, you do the best you can, you do good deeds, and then hopefully, God will be merciful.
There's a hope, whereas in Christianity, it's a covenant, which is like a promise.
Right.
Which is bigger than hope.
You know, in Islam, the idea that you're crossing over the road, the what's that you walk over this kind of thing that's as thin as a hair.
The Sirat Bridge.
Right, Sirat Bridge, going to paradise, right?
Yeah.
Christianity doesn't say that.
No.
It says there actually is no bridge except for Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And once you accept Jesus, it's not like you have to do this.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, and then on top of that, you have to accept Jesus and do all these other things.
Right.
You know, the assurance of heaven is only found in Jesus, right? The assurance of eternal salvation and forgiveness and all these things are only found in Jesus. So, you know, there are differences there.
Right. So there's the hope that God will be merciful, but then you've got to face the potential punishment of the grave. You've got to face the scales of judgment, and you've got to face the Sirat Bridge.
Right.
And you're hoping the three of those things go well. But if it's hope, then there's room for fear and anxiety as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Right,
which
so
in the case of the Ramy universe,
And even then, you know, with all of those
got
things,
all
you're
of
still
that.
thinking you have to fight the big boss at the end,
Yeah.
right? Like in the video games or something like that, you know.
So because of that, right? So what Ramy says about the dog is that it just loves him unconditionally. If you, oh yeah, you'll probably be fine, is not unconditional love. Right?
No.
It's you hope God loves you unconditionally.
Totally.
Whereas the cross gives you something definitive to look back on and know God loves you unconditionally. And you can look to him and actually have assurance. And that unconditional love from God that he's expressed to you through Jesus is transformative.
Right. And I mean, I think it's what gets lost sometimes in the Christian, you know, Hallmark Channel, you know, kind of movies that Christianity pumps
I'm
out.
not gonna lie, I've never seen a single one.
I've never watched a full one either, honestly.
There was one about football I watched all the way through.
Nice.
That was pretty early on though. Oh my gosh, you made me lose my point.
What is lost in the Hallmark Christian movies?
Yeah, is this? I mean, I was going back to Ezekiel 16. Okay.
Yeah.
So Ezekiel 16 talks about God finding this dying baby in the desert, and he picks the baby up and he nurses it to health and cleans it off and feeds it and makes it grow. And, you know, it's a beautiful girl by the end and is wearing all of this splendor. And then she goes off and does all of these evil things, right? And of course, God, this is where you see the judgment of God, right? I gave you all of these things and this is what happens. But he doesn't throw her into hell, right? He has a plan for her redemption. And he goes and redeems her.
Which is,
right?
The girl's a metaphor for...
Right, it's a metaphor for Israel, but it's also a metaphor for us, right? Right? So it's the mercy of God at work. Understanding that there's a judgment that is coming, but God's desire is to redeem at all times, right? And, you know, you're watching this kind of contrast happen in the show where people are afraid of not, like, what happened. There is no redemptive step after that. Like, we're not looking at it. It's just there's a lot of mystery. There's a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of tension, and there's a lot of fear based on it. And, you know, kind of what I love about the end of this season 3 is that, okay, people are taking steps towards this idea of, you know, all of the things I believed are wrong. All of the things I told myself about, you know, the things I tried to put in this hole are wrong. So what's refreshing about it, you know, because normally, like, TV shows now in the secular world, everybody just goes nuts and, you know, it's like Yellowstone, right? Like, everybody's bad.
Yeah.
You know, a show like that, everybody's bad. There are really no like characters with, it's just a bunch of people trying to be like, I'm trying to not be evil, but I really am evil, right? But in this, you know, you would look at it and say, you know, people are actually trying to take a step out of the thing that makes them bad and trying to be good. Yeah. And, you know, their understanding is that it has to happen through God. Yeah. So looking at it from a Christian context, you're being like, they're right. It's almost like they're getting saved.
Right. So
it's almost like you're getting
so basically, now let's wrap on this note. Now the question is, where does it go in season 4? And that remains the mystery of. I'm really, really curious if season 4 has like a happy ending and this like leads to like transformation, or if it's just this kind of like cycle of futility kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, because any story is gonna be either of those two.
Like maybe
options.
I have a theory that the last scene in this, maybe Ramy going to a mosque and then some guy grabbing his feet and washing between his toes again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I want it could be circular.
I think you could go a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at it from the way like a screenwriter might look at it, I could see like it being like the end of Taxi Driver. So at the end of Taxi Driver, you know, he gets shot, and then you see him talking to Diane. I think it's Diane Keaton.
He redeems himself, right?
No, he's dead.
But like he did
right,
this
but it's
heroic
normal.
thing.
Life is normal, right?
Yeah.
So he's having kind of like this thing, but it was really dead. Or you could, you know, maybe look at it and say, like, it's really similar to Uncut Gems. Did you ever see that with Adam Sandler?
Yeah.
Okay, so
or just like Breaking Bad.
I mean, yeah, like he's like the character in Uncut Gems is a great movie.
It's a great movie. Really good.
He's trying really hard.
Really
you know what I mean? To
Uncut
find this.
Gems, and he's a jeweler.
And he's a jeweler, right? Like it's.
No, I'm joking.
Yeah. No, it's
mind blown.
Well, no, it's an actual connection. So if I was writing an end, and I would be like, okay, well, what happened in all of these other circumstances?
Sure.
How would I end this story?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what would I contrast it with?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you know, what wouldn't I do, or what would I do, based on how other stories are told, and how do I make this unique? So you could have a thing where you're like, okay, it's like at the end of Uncut Gems where he just dies, right? Or it could be like Taxi Driver, like he dies, but there's almost like this step into heaven he's taking, right? Or, you know, it's a good old fashioned, hey, you know, everything worked out, right? Like, you know, Dina gets married and has kids and finds her career. Parents keep their house and refine, you know, Islam, and Ramy is back with Zainab and raising his daughter,
right?
Or, you know, at least in her life and that kind of thing. So, you know,
we shall see.
Yeah.
Well, there's the chaos ending where Ramy ends up married to that to Ayala.
Oh my gosh!
Wow.
No, you know what would be amazing is if they.
You as my bond servant.
Yeah, it's like
because he can't pay his debt.
No, he's just sitting on the end at the end of the like everything. He's in charge of the Jewish mafia.
Yeah. and then he just sort of like pulls out a Star of David, looks at it, and then.
Yeah, right. Was that? That was actually a movie. I forget what it was, but it had Viggo Mortensen and.
Eastern Promises.
Eastern Promises, right? Like at the end, you know, he's sitting on the end and he's in charge of the Russian mafia.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
Like. So that you know, like okay, this is what I'm gonna say. You could have Eastern Promises, you could have Uncut Gems, or you could have like Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. The dog's Force Ghost is there.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, everything works out at the end, and, you know, the Boomer's there in the corner, and, you know, like, you know, Han and Leia are going to go off and have kids and be married and all that other stuff, so,
Pretty much, yeah.
Except for the Ramy sequel trilogy.
Yeah, right.
Okay, here's another potential, here'd be another amazing twist. So, there's a cliffhanger with, is Mo actually going to take the Saudi woman as a second wife? Like, it seems he actually had a shot of that.
Oh, he did, right? Yeah, like, they were talking.
But then...
Well, if it's a Ramy verse, then no, right?
No.
Because Mo is not... Mo lives in Texas with a Hispanic...
Mo has kids, though, in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Yeah, no, he does. And Ramy has kids.
He does. I mean, maybe it all... Yeah. I mean, he tells her that, right? Like, I have a son. I'm not going to change my situation.
4 slots, right? So there's the mother of this child. There's the Mexican woman back in Texas.
Oh gosh!
And then there's two more slots.
It's like 4D chess. It's like that chess they play in Star Trek.
So,
It's like it's all over the place.
so
Oh my God.
the new season starts with Ramy, trying to get his life together, trying to get into order and everything like that, and then he's invited to Mo's wedding for his second wife, and is like thinking about all this stuff, and then they pull up the veil, and it's Ayala.
Oh my gosh!
and then he's like, I'll pay you back. He says, don't worry, Ramy. It is considered dowry for marrying your friend.
Oh my gosh!
That'd be the most chaotic start to season
Yeah.
4 possible.
Right.
Oh my God.
Anyway, we're like an hour and a half now.
Yeah. No.
We've gone up
Peace
significantly, everyone. But this was the reason it keeps going up though, because it gets better and better every season.
It's true.
Every season.
It's true.
So thank you guys for watching. We'll review more shows and Ramy season 4 when it comes out. Next week we're probably going to do Christians, the Middle East, and the end times. Stay tuned.